When my sister's husband died, she took to spending hours watching ghost light scans of him walking through the house, working in the garage, and whatever mundane tasks he might have went about before his death. This escalated into reviewing conversations that they had had together, and entire days now lost but in the light of the scanner. She told me one night as we sat at her kitchen table, after she had disregarded a month of work, that she had spent hours the night before watching herself and him make love 2 months ago. I gave her the same old talk about unhealthy obsessions and letting go of the past, but I knew it was a lost cause. The past can be a paradise once you start seeing it through a new lens, or in this case, a clean pair of blue-violet glasses. To this day, I wonder if there was really anything I could have done so that I wouldn't have had to have found her lying dead in that room. She had set the scanner so that it would replay her last 20 minutes before the suicide over and over until someone arrived. It was her form of a suicide note, a simple explanation of how she had come to believe that if she died in the ghost light, she could travel in the ghost light, live in the ghost light. It is a known fact that for most of the human history, only approximately 1 out of every 5 million people or less was actually possessed of what you might call a photographic memory. For the most part, human beings have a tendency to alter almost every memory they have, with wish, doubt, fear, and denial. Even at the turn of the new millennia, with the advent of genetic engineering and intellect-boosting therapies, the human memory remained a very flawed and fragmented thing. For all those who boasted that the ghost light would do away with debates over what had happened or who said what I now look back on with fond laughter for their naivety. Never underestimate the human ability to distort their own perceptions in the pursuit of substantiating their own beliefs and delusions. As hard as it may be to believe, ghost light became more of a detriment than anyone would have imagined, except maybe for all the people who tried to warn everyone of this exact thing. And then something happened, which turned it all upside down. It was the year 3 of the ghost light scanner's onslaught upon world culture, when the first news report was made concerning a recent series of murders in the St. Louis suburbs. Someone traveling door to door, introducing themselves as a health inspector, had brutally murdered 4 families over the course of 9 months in a strange bondage ritual, during which family members were forced to watch as the others were tortured and killed. The killer made no attempt to hide or disguise himself, and in fact discussed the murders as they were being carried out as if performing for an audience. It became clear to investigators by the second killing that the killer was doing this intentionally for the benefit of officers using the ghost light scanner. The perpetrator was easily identified as a real estate agent living in the city, and was soon apprehended and brought into custody. Neil Kenny vehemently denied any part in the killings, but despite a lack of DNA evidence and several solid alibis, he was convicted in one of the shortest murder trials in Missouri history. After only 1 year on death row, he was executed via lethal injection. 1 week later, there was another ghost light murder, and even more mysteriously, ghost light scans at other similar murders across the country revealed a culprit who, to all appearances, could only be the deceased Neil Kenny. A full-scale investigation was immediately launched. The first theory was that someone was impersonating the dead serial killer. However, computer analysis of the scans showed that every dimension of the killer's body and face matched Neil Kenny to an exact measurement. Furthermore, the killer continuously referenced events occurring during his trial, incarceration, and execution which only Kenny should have known. The most baffling thing about the murders was that no details concerning how the killer had gained entry and committed the crimes made any sense to forensic experts. It would seem that the information being presented by the ghost light scanners did not parallel the events that had actually taken place. How could it be possible that the scanners could be wrong? The answers would only be forthcoming as more anomalies came to light. A woman in Corpus Christi, Texas, reported that she had witnessed her daughter being molested by a neighbor in plain view using the ghost light. Although her own daughter denied that the attack had ever taken place, and upon a medical examination showed no signs of abuse, authorities, upon reviewing the digital history recorded on the scanner, did indeed witness the described occurrence. An elderly man from Michigan called police after witnessing a drug-fueled party taking place in his garage while he was gone visiting family in Florida. Upon investigation, no signs of any party could be found, and the teenagers in question all passed blood analysis and hair follicle testing with flying colors. Police were frustrated when called 2 more times by the same man over the next month with the same report. After reluctantly agreeing to return to the man's home, they found that the scanner showed the third party to be during an evening when the owner of the house was actually present, and inside the house, in bed. When the news broke, I was sitting at home watching some late-night talk jibber-jabber between a young self-deprecating host and a morally ubiquitous, overrated movie star. I was lying in a semi-conscious trance of antidepressants and ineffective sleeping pills when my program was interrupted by a late-breaking bulletin in the corner box of the window-sized paper-thin screen on my wall that doubled as a TV viewing unit and computer monitor. Realizing that I could not process the information in my current state, I closed my eyes and attuned my consciousness to the Wi-Fi waves, sent my virtual self floating into the web. I was immediately dropped into the first level of virtual cyberspace. As the three-dimensional console grid appeared before me as a hovering outline in the sparkling mass of numbers and light, I touched the box flashing current news feed and immediately began downloading the information directly into the implanted data processor in my left frontal lobe. Realizing that I could not process the information in my current state, I closed my eyes and attuned my consciousness to the Wi-Fi waves, sent my virtual self floating into the web. I was immediately dropped into the first level of virtual cyberspace. As the three-dimensional console grid appeared before me as a hovering outline in the sparkling mass of numbers and light, I touched the box flashing current news feed and immediately began downloading the information directly into the implanted data processor in my left frontal lobe. A leading theoretical physicist had, at the advent of the ghost light discovery, sent a thesis to the leading members of the American Corporate Ethics and Technology Committee, ACET for short, stating that in accordance with multiverse theory that it was entirely possible that ghost light did not just reveal the given events of our own particular quantum band, but it may indeed touch upon others. The physicist had explained in detail that if another parallel reality close to our own had invented ghost-light technology around the same time as we had, then the result may be a bridge in quantum space where both realities merged. The ACET had done all but laugh at the warning by the physicist and had immediately dismissed the report as parapsychology. This had all occurred before ghost-light scanners had even been tested thoroughly in Europe. Now it seemed possible that maybe the past we had been viewing, at least on some occasions, may not have been our own. And the one theory that was making news now was one that even the physicist had not hypothesized, that in this quantum bridge space, one reality may even affect the other. The public was warned not to buy into this paranoid rumor, as it was unproven conjecture by conspiracy nuts. As a result, there would be no recall, no in-depth revaluation of the ghost light's properties, and no rules put forth to increase the safety of the public. The results would be horrific. It was later that week when I received a message at my home office from the Internal Affairs Wing of the American branch of Yamashita Enterprises. My name is Clayton Marcells, and I am a freelance corporate insurance claims investigator. When a corporation feels that there may be a possibility that a mistake has been made, and said corporation may be held liable, I am contacted to dissect the situation with a set of protocol of interviews, detective work, and outright data theft from any available information source. I am part private detective, part hacker, and part damage control specialist. If I find that something has in fact gone wrong, and it often has, then it is also part of my job to make sure that things don't get out of hand for my employers. I would like to be able to tell you that I am a good-hearted person caught in the web of the world's corporate spiders, but I would be lying. My mother described me as a greedy, materialistic sociopath who would die alone and unloved. Suffice to say, I did not argue with her evaluation. I like puzzles, and I like mysteries, but I do not, for the most part, like people. I am my job, and very little else. I accepted the job and was immediately given a network access code to all files concerning the Indigo 9 program and the Ghostlight scanner. As soon as I ended my conference with the Yamashita representative, I immediately entered cyberspace and began collecting information concerning what was given to me as the highest case of possible liability. Neil Kenny. After downloading his court proceedings, I entered the database of his personal psychological profile and uncovered hundreds of hours of interviews and psychological analysis performed by leading specialists. What I found was fascinating. Neil Kenny had been an abused, poverty-stricken child raised on the streets of Chicago. He had been a poor student, but had been rated with an IQ score of 130. He had been arrested on several occasions as a young teenager for setting fires and the killing and mutilation of animals in his neighborhood. Up until this point, he had met all the requirements for being a classic example of a young serial killer in the making. However, when Neil was 14, his aunt and uncle stepped in and had him forcibly removed from the home of his parents, who were confirmed drug addicts. Neil was taken out of the city to a ranch in Idaho, where he was raised by, in his words, the kindest and most loving people that God has ever seen fit to place on this planet. From this point on, Neil became an exemplary student and eventually would graduate with honors from Idaho State, where he had attended on basketball scholarships and his own hard work. He would marry a woman he met through his church and become the father of 5 successful, well-adjusted children. After his arrest, a search of his home and the office computer archives would reveal only a predilection for Japanese cartoon anime pornography and possibly a fetish for women dressed like nuns. He also collected beer cans from around the world and enjoyed fishing. During his trial, prosecutors focused on his early childhood and ignored the life he had led after that point, painting him as another Dennis Rader BTK-type killer. Also ignored was that it would be physically impossible for him to be present at 3 of the 4 original murders for which he had been accused. Neil's family had been avidly defending his innocence since his arrest. It seemed that if the Ghostlight did prove to be inaccurate, then a lawsuit of enormous proportions would indeed be in the working. If this was allowed to happen, and a review of other cases using Ghostlight occurred, then Yamashita and the criminal justice system would have its hands full. The next step in my investigation involved a net search of the physicist who had initially spotted the flaws in the first scanner prototypes. It wasn't difficult to find his name since he had recently been mentioned in several news reports, but locating him currently was a completely different animal. I was surprised to find that Dr. Harris Levine had been all of 16 years old at the time of the original findings. Apparently, the physics prodigy had been studying the field of quantum bridge research and had made his discovery after being asked for his help on the project by a Yamashita developer. Knowing that I would need a direct access to his research, I began what I thought would be an easy data sweep of his personal files and programs. However, I found his entire online portfolio blocked by a massive and impenetrable personalized firewall. For 7 straight hours of cyber reconnaissance, I found what I thought was a hole in his security through a social networking site, only to be greeted by the giant digitalized hologram of a glowing purple skull. "Mr. Marsalis," it said, as it hovered menacingly before me in virtual space. "I've been watching you stomp around my data files now for hours, and finally felt your intrusion should be addressed. I was shocked beyond description that I had ever been caught so easily while investigating an individual. This kind of security was usually only used by the largest corporations and the highest levels of government. If you truly desire an interview, then I suggest you present yourself in person at my office at Portland University. Please call and make an appointment. As the skull vanished, I was then immediately ejected out of the program and found myself sitting on my couch, completely blocked from cyberspace for the next 2 days by an insidious virus implanted by Levine Security. Since I had 48 hours before my software would be cleaned of the infection, I bought a ticket on the cross-country subsonic tran for Oregon. The Distortion Diaries, September 12th, 2033. The human condition seems to be plagued by an eternal state of building and destroying. It is through this process of acquisition and loss that we are, I believe, supposed to learn that attachments to things of this world are useless and futile. However, the vast majority of us as a species do not seem inclined to forego this basic inclination to possess. There was a popular television series which was on for a time concerning people referred to by modern culture as hoarders. A hoarder is in essence a collector who has disregarded the acceptable judgment of value over their possessions and have by obsessive nature began to amass a steady accumulation of, well, everything. The thought of parting, even with a single item from their inventory of everything, brings the individual into a near hysterical state of loss. The only thing that these people seem to place little value on is other people. They will watch as family and friends steadily disappear in an ongoing disintegration of social attachment while they jealously guard over an increasing mound of useless objects. It never ceases to amaze me how all it takes is one little wire to go loose in the complex computer which is the brain for a human personality to completely derail. It seems so easy for one small personality trait to expound itself over the whole of the identity until a person becomes that trait. Collectors become hoarders, partiers become alcoholics, lovers become sex addicts, and as in my case, a doctor becomes a god. Hey, wait a minute, you might say. That's not exactly the same thing. Divinity is not just some trait attributed to doctors. You're right, it's not. But it was a quality which was given to me, and I became a doctor before ascending to divinity. I was born with an innate knowledge of life and death. I used this intuition to become a surgeon, and from the meager tools and insights of medicine, I elevated my abilities to a status of godhood. But I digress. What is the difference between you and, let's say, a table? I mean, you're both made up of more or less the same particles on a subatomic level, so what makes you so damn special? Well, let's see. You move, think, feel, fart, eat, and screw, while on the other hand, the table just sits there and lets you put your drinks on it. It really comes down to flesh. You are flesh, and the table serves your flesh. Now we have hit upon a very fundamental truth of the human condition. The particles which make up your body have something in the mix that the particles in the table don't. Wasn't the table once a tree, you ask? Yep. So in essence, you have subjugated the tree with your flesh and are now using its corpse on which to eat your dinner. You have exalted yourself over that tree and diminished its role to that of an object. This is, in fact, a low state of divinity. All of us are low gods to a certain degree, but what of those who subjugate the flesh of others to their own? To a point, we all do it. However, it is really a matter of the degree in which we subjugate others that determines our ranking on the totem pole of power. As for myself, just understand that in my opinion, you have a lot more in common with that table than you do with me. You have any idea what I can do? To me, flesh is like a canvas, and I can transform it into something new and beautiful. In a few hours, I can cure a condition which might have killed you 30 years ago. Some kid gets his face bashed while trying to replicate a stunt performed by some skateboard pro. Then I can make him look better than he did to start with. Come on, people. You acknowledge my superiority every time you pay the bill. If it wasn't for people like me, then the average lifespan would still be in the 30s. And every time a woman got pregnant, they'd be saying prayers that she'd live through the delivery. How can you even question that I was giving something that you weren't? To be honest, I am insulted that you made me pay back my student loan. You should have paid my way through medical school and then thanked me for taking the time to do it. Seriously, I could have just designed some computer software and made $1 million, then sat back poolside and drank daiquiris for the rest of my life. Oh, but somebody designs a new video game system and the credit cards come out. I stitch your organs back into your torso and you sue me for malpractice. I'm just saying that you should be grateful that I ever picked up a scalpel. And if in turn I begin to request a little extra something in compensation, you should be that much more willing to oblige. You eventually will just have to acknowledge that there's just something more to my particles than yours. As a point of interest, think of this. You kill trees and make tables. Well, Ed Gein, the serial killer, made tables out of people. Well, maybe not tables, but quite a few lampshades, mobiles, and other assorted crafts. Ed Gein was by no means a doctor. As a matter of fact, he wasn't even particularly that bright. He just took the initiative to exalt his flesh over that of others. How does that relate to me? At least I give back. I've given you bigger boobs, pouty lips, and a cellulite-free ass. Gein just made a dress out of vaginas and went frolicking in the cemetery. I'm not making crafts here, people. What I do is art. What it comes down to is that special something in those particles that set them apart from all the others. That individual energy of direction which determines what will have dominance over everything else. I've got it. You don't. Learn to deal with it. People come to me and pay great deals of money so that I may free them of their flaws. In many instances, these flaws are merely exaggerations of a troubled mind, but who am I to say? The mind has a filter through which the senses feed information, and when that filter is imperfect, as it most always is, a person's perception of themselves and the world around them can be horrifying and sad. Humans despise the jokes that nature plays on them. They see themselves as the victims of a barrage of unseen forces, which force them into a state of ugliness from which they always so desperately wish to escape. I can offer them this escape. I can give them a way to do what they've always wanted to do. However, I could offer you so much more. I can liberate you from the bounds that reality has forced upon you. The only true beauty is within the soul, and I can merge that beauty with the flesh, and then project it back into a spirit more exquisite than any of these people could have accomplished on their own. Beauty is the reworking of nature by the mind, and this is my trade. However, my true gift is the recreation of the soul via the flesh, and this is my art. The real magic, the real art, is really all about the ghost. God. Our world is filled with them. They linger everywhere, and they make my work ever so much more complicated. Anyone who has tried to commit a murder must deal with the irrevocable conclusion that their victim's ghost will soon be running off to the authorities to report the misdeed. These aimless, whining spirits have been the bane of my every attempt to create. I must admit that in truth, my choice of entering the field of medicine was heavily influenced by the fact that this offered me a means by which to kill without the spirit of the deceased being aware that they were in fact murdered at all. Still, my experiments were so limited that at times I contemplated whether it was even worth the trouble. It was not until I was brought into contact with a new creation of modern technology that I truly was allowed to bloom into my true powers of creation. It began one night when I was driving home from the clinic and I received a message on my cell phone from an associate of mine named Cleve. Cleve was a member of a loosely knit group of underground body modification enthusiasts and also was one of the few people who I had trusted to be allowed some degree of trust in my private world. Cleve ran a small tattoo and piercing shop off the main business district in St. Louis, but a substantial part of his income was in the acquisition and selling of black market technology and medical supplies. He had been an invaluable asset to me over the past few years as my secret hobby grew and I developed a growing need for equipment and tools by which to accomplish my goals. The beauty of Cleve was that he did not ask questions, but was still completely willing to find and deliver any item that I might require. It was a rarity for him to contact me, and I knew that this meant he had come across something he felt I would like considerably. Despite putting in a long day at the clinic, I turned my car and headed directly for Cleve's shop. I parked a few blocks away from the shop in order to not draw attention and walked through the warm falling summer rain down the sidewalk past the empty unrented buildings towards the glowing neon axe which was the emblem of Cleve's establishment. I could see the telltale wisps of pale shadow in the darkness of the vacant buildings which indicated the presence of roaming apparitions. At one time this had been a thriving area, and I'm sure the spooks inside had at one point worked jobs in the building where they now reenacted perfunctory actions reminiscent of their former existence. I heard a voice from an alleyway as I passed, and what I first thought was a vagrant was instead a floating phantom moaning wearily as it studied the winding rope of intestines which it held pathetically in its hands. That's the beauty of ghosts. Humans have this way of carrying over their final impressions during the moment of death into the imagery which represents the actual form of their ghost. A spirit will often represent the memory it has of its last few minutes in a very obvious and visually disturbing way. The process is truly interesting and ultimately annoying. I entered the shop and heard the familiar electronic beep of the door sensor as I glanced around the empty waiting room and studied the various band posters and winced at the overpowering aroma of incense and sweat. It was an hour past closing, but Cleve had been expecting me. He walked from the back room as he removed his latex gloves, and I saw that he had been adding yet another scribble to the endless gallery of inane pictures he had scrawled over his body. Cleve was known for a very particular his choice of tattoos and was covered in everything from skulls and comic book villains to Celtic crosses and Buddhist proverbs. "Hey there, Dr. Kenny," he said as he studied the pentagram he had just eternally needled into his wrist. Cleve was also a cornucopia of scarification and piercings which had made his skin a bizarre circus tapestry of bumps and shining metal. "This better be good, Cleve," I said, as I approached the counter and began leafing through the file of exhibited pictures. "Oh, it's good, bro. You're gonna shit yourself when you see it. Come on." He gestured for me to follow him through the beaded curtain of the back room. He led me past the chairs into another room even further back where there was a table. He gestured for me to sit and then began rummaging in a utility closet before he emerged, bearing a small microwave-sized black box, on which one side was covered in the simple console, and the other a clear glass pod like the side of an opaque bowling ball. "I've already got a microwave, Cleve," I said, as he sat before me with a look of pride shining in his blue eyes. "This ain't no microwave, man. And I'll bet the farm you ain't got one of these bad boys." "What is it?" I said as I began eyeing the keyboard and switches with curiosity. "This here is what you call a ghost light," he said as he thumped at the top of the object with his ringed hand. "See, I remember that you're always complaining about how much you hate the ghosts, man. This here will take care of that." I looked at him with suspicion. "What do you mean?" I mean that this will get rid of the ghosts. He laughed as he sat down and lit a cigarette. It's just a prototype, but it will be on the shelves in a couple years. A friend of mine broke into a Yamashita test lab to score some goods he could fence for crank money, and as soon as he saw this little gem, I thought of you. How much? I was staring at the device with doubt, but more than a little interest. That's the thing, Doc. I want to negotiate a trade. Cleve was smiling in that cunning animal way that would have made someone less resilient than myself ill. Don't fuck with me, Cleve. If the thing works, I want it. Do you get on the internet much, Doc? Cleve leaned back in his chair casually, and for a moment I was tempted to reach across the table and begin ripping out his piercings one by one. Sure, whatever, Cleve. Get to the fucking point. Everyone's got their own social networks. Well, I've got one too. There are a lot of people like me out there with a passion for body modification. Obsession, more like it, I thought, but I didn't want to interrupt just yet. You see, Doc, we can only go so far with the resources that are available to us. A lot of us have these ideas for what the next level of this art should be. We want to surpass the limits set by nature and society to attain a greater perfection of self-expression. This is really very interesting, Cleve, but what you and your buddies discuss in your tattoo chat rooms doesn't interest me. Look, there are places out there where doctors like you are offering bigger and better options to the world of bodily modification, but they're all way too timid for the kind of things that I and my associates are seeking. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I don't have a pretty good idea of what you're into, Doc. I give Cleve a sharp and deadly look as I folded my arms over my chest. But I understand that I am not here to judge. You see, I don't really care. My business is to give people what they want, and to make money. What I'm offering you is an opportunity for both of us to further our own ambitions. I will give you this little gadget, and in exchange, you will do some private work for a very select group of my clientele. What kind of work? The same as what you normally do, but minus the lame societal and ethical restrictions. We're talking no-holds-barred body modification surgery, Doc. This is a religion to us. Here, look at this. I watched as Cleve rose and went to a cabinet. Over the plain metal scrubbed sink and withdrew what appeared to be a pressurized spray canister. Returning to his seat, he set it down beside the device. I took it in my hand and I saw that this tube bore the YE Yamashita brand logo. Reading the ingredients label, I saw the word methoxyfluorane 6. You know what this is, don't you, Doc? Cleve said once more, grinning broadly. Methoxyfluorane is an anesthetic, I answered bemusedly, but it hasn't been used in decades. That's right, but the masterminds at good old Yamashita have been working on this shit for quite a while. I got a friend in Colombia who hacked the recipe directly from their database. He's been mass producing the shit in a factory lab for the past year. And why would he want to do that? I said, placing the canister back on the table. This is the greatest thing to hit body modification circuit since clean needles. You see, you can take a couple of hits of this, and you can have your own damn spleen removed with no discomfort whatsoever. As a matter of fact, you might find the experience quite enjoyable. This stuff turns pain into pleasure, and you remain completely lucid and aware through the entire process. It delivers the most euphoric and sensually physical high you could ever imagine. This stuff makes surgery better than sex, Doc, and you remember the entire thing with clarity. The only thing is that it's about the most addictive drug you'll ever get your hands on. That doesn't stop your friends from using it, does it? Not in the least. We need you, Doc. Do you know what these people would pay to have their fantasies materialized? The human mind is a vast and turbulent ocean of alteration and transmutation. The flesh is a prison, and it holds us bound in chains forged on a genetic cellular level. I had to hand it to Cleve. He really knew how to make a point. Look, I know what you are, and is the fairest of trades. I will set you free, and you will do the same for me. What is it exactly that you want to be, Cleve? I looked into his shining blue eyes and saw a light switch on inside the darkness of his twisted mind. He knew I was taking the bait. This was the pivotal moment when his months of planning would come to fruition. I want to be a horror like has never existed before. I want to look like the vision of darkness that children imagine waiting for them on the other side of the closet door in the middle of a stormy night. I want to be the thing that crawls out from the sewer and makes a runaway wish they had never stepped foot outside their parents' front door. Why, Cleve? Why would you want to do that to yourself? I ask this not out of any attempt to dissuade his psychosis, but merely out of pure intellectual fascination. He looked at me for a moment as if he were contemplating this mystery with the apprehension of one about to confess the darkest secret of their mortal soul. Because I am afraid, and the only way to defeat the horror is to become it. So, there lay the catalyst for what was about to unfold. The victims would become the perpetrators, and the prey, the predator. I was about to unleash a diseased cancer which had been lying dormant and hungry, like an ancient dragon in the mass human unconscious, and the wall which stood between the transfiguring primal urge of man to reshape and the unbreakable manacles of nature's law was about to crumble. I had given the key, and I was going to be allowed to unlock Hell's door.